What are you saying, bro? You ready for another lesson?
Man, I can't wait, man. It's been a while, So.
That's a screw.
You can even tell already,
Hey, right rudder, that's it.
Wheel 01, you can backtrack now.
Need to be over the field in between the two.
Alright.
What do you know about increasing the angle of bank?
Full speed.
Exactly.
You're fine, you're on the centre line, and then suddenly you're not, bro.
Next time you're in a grass, bro.
That landing. Whew. I'm worn out.
Are you aiming to be a commercial pilot?
Yes, at some point.
Yes, so these calls, they have to be made in a commercial environment. Well done, mate. You're gonna make a good commercial pilot.
Thank you.
I'll walk up behind the aircraft.
You're very behind the aircraft. We've got a fuel leak. Are we? Yeah.
By the way, got to the whiskey, sorry. The whiskey is quite strong. Mate, you're gonna make a good commercial pilot.
You still have control.
No, you tell me when you want to take control. You tell me when you want to take control.
Ever? Do I have to?
Yes. As I say so. Bear in mind, you're going to have to work with what you've got, normally. What do you need?
This one. I'll make use of what I've got.
Previously on Future Pilot 901.
Okay, how you feeling?
Feeling good?
Good. You're gonna go solo.
Okay. Student Will 08 is ready for departure. We are off.
Student Wheel 08, surface wind is 330 at 9 knots, we've got one to vacate.
Student Will 08.
Charlie Kilo, right base, get out to land. Student Wheel 08, minute takes and well done.
This aircraft is so nice to fly with.
Yeah, very nice.
Victor Golf, clear to enter South Controlled airspace now in the climb task sheet 3,000 feet, heading 090 degrees.
Yes, 3,000 feet is very nice and smooth.
Yeah.
It's not like in the cloud.
Victor Golf, resume our location, Sierra November. This comes the procedure report on localized established.
The whole point of getting your IMC is you fly clouds. That's sort of where we are roughly. See?
Okay.
So we came in for an approach on runway 23. We did a missed approach, and now we're being vectored around to do another approach into runway 23.
So, the safety review for 2025 is out. Some of the main topics include runaway pitch trim, fuel sampling errors, and loss of control in flight. All that and more coming up right in about 30 seconds. Ever since I was a kid, I had a dream of becoming a pilot, but could never afford it. One day I decided to stop making excuses, to sacrifice my comfort, to make my dream happen. My name is D, and this is my journey. This is Future Pilot 901. What's up, boys and girls, ladies and gents, aviators, aviation enthusiasts? Welcome back to Future Pilot 901 live on YouTube and Kick every Monday, 7 p.m. Zulu time. That's UTC. I'm your future captain. My name is D, and this is episode number 37 of Future Pilot 901 live. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. The year is steadily progressing. The days are steadily going by, and I hope you're making the most of the time that you have. Don't know about you guys, but I always have I try to foster a sense of gratitude every day, because life is not promised to anyone. Just saying. And so every now and then I do try to look around me and just practice gratitude for what I have, for the things I've been blessed with, the people whom I've been blessed to have in my life. So I'm very grateful. I'm very grateful. And when things get difficult, particularly when things get difficult, it becomes even more important for me to make sure I look around me and show gratitude and practice that gratitude for the things I have. So I'm grateful. I'm grateful. I hope you guys are well. Thank you very much for joining me at whatever point you're joining me. I know some people are replay watchers. Some people are live watchers. Some people watch on TV. Some people watch on their phones. Some people can jump in the chat. Some people can't jump in the chat, but I appreciate you nonetheless. Shout out to the new subscribers on YouTube and to the new followers on Kick. Yes, very, very, very grateful. So speaking of interesting experiences that I'm grateful for, last week I got to fly with an aspiring pilot. This dad reached out to me and was like, yo, my son loves flying. He wants to become a pilot. And I was like, yeah, come through. So we went for a flight, and I have to say, it was really good, really enjoyable. Yeah, we flew out to Duxford, of all places. Amazing place to fly to. And we did a Stansted zone transit. This was my third time transiting through Stansted. It is busy. It is crazy. Definitely one of the most crazy zone transit I've ever done. And I looked at my cameras and I was like, yeah, this time I finally filmed it. I've got the audio. I've got the video. I can post it. It's going to be amazing, because it does, you kind of have to stay on top of the radios, because they want to get you through without impacting commercial traffic, basically. And then I got home, had a look at the footage, and did I record the sound? No, I did not record the sound. So 3 times I've flown the zone transit. 3 times I don't have the sound. So I'm going to have to do it again. And this time I'll probably have another backup. I'll have a backup sound recording device going so that I do not miss out on it, because it is genuinely a very interesting experience, very challenging experience. You definitely have to be on your RT, your radio telephony. You have to know all your VRPs because they could send you anywhere. So this time around, I'll just show you guys what they told me to do this time around, which was quite interesting because it was different from the last time. Where is it? Let me have a look. Where is my Sky Demon? Right, here we are. So this time around, they got me to, we departed. Let me just clear this. No, not create route. We want to start again. So we went here, bam, bam, then called them about their Berners Lake. And basically the traffic was landing runway 04. Good thing I checked all of that earlier. So then what they got me to do is to cleared me into the zone to about 1 mile off of the runway 04 threshold. And then once I had traffic in sight about to land, I was then told after the landing, cross. So that was quite cool. And then, of course, we just... and then after that, I was offered, do you want to go through Audley End or somewhere else? And I was like, I've got no idea what the other place they said was. So I just took Audley End and went that way. So, yeah, being on top of your VRPs is very important if you're going to transit Stansted. Knowing Audley End, Northampstead, Canfield, all of these. You want to know all of these VRPs because they could send you to any of them, in my experience so far. So yeah, it was good fun. Good fun. Good fun. Good fun. So, came across a video that I wanted to share with you guys that I thought was interesting because it captures some of the things that I've said in previous episodes, even back when we used to run the Day One Mentality podcast. Does anyone remember that? The Day One Mentality podcast with Mo. But this is going to be something quite familiar to most people if you've been watching these shows. Check it out. Let's go to the tape.
Look at the next image. You have 3 seconds to identify at least 3 blue objects. Now I want you to tell me the one yellow thing. You didn't see it because your brain is designed to filter your reality to only focus on what you deem to be important in that moment. So in other words, you're never seeing all of reality. You're only viewing it through your perception. And this applies to us outside of little experiments like this. If you constantly tell yourself that you're not good enough or you're not capable or opportunities don't come to you or you're just not good with money, that's what you see. That's what your brain focuses on because that's what it thinks is important and that's what sets the filter. You are the programmer of your mind. You are the trainer of your reality. If you can change the programming, you can change what you see.
Wow. Got you? Yeah. Got me too. First time I watched it, I was like, yes, I'm going to get this. I'm a pilot. My scanning ability is at least above average. I was like, yes, I'm going to get it. And then she was like, blue item. And I was like, yeah, you got me. There's another experiment, a similar experiment where there are people, there's a team wearing black t-shirts, a team wearing white t-shirts, and you're told to count the passes between the team that's wearing the white t-shirts, something like that. And then you're counting the passes, and right at the end they go, okay, so did you see the gorilla? And you go, what gorilla? And of course, you run the tape back, and right in the middle, person in a gorilla suit comes out, beats their chest, and walks right off, and you don't notice it. Isn't that crazy? Isn't that crazy? It's called negative hallucination when that happens. That's why you don't see it. Interesting. I've never heard of the term negative hallucination. Let's have a look. Let's fact check you. Let's fact check you. Negative hallucination. Let's see if you know what you're talking about. Negative hallucination. A psychological phenomenon where an individual fails to perceive a person or object that is actually present in their environment, essentially creating a blank space or blindness to reality. Do you know what? Do you know what? Snake biters. Do you know what? There you go. Yeah, and you know yeah, exactly. Now I can't unsee it when I watch it though. Yeah, that's true. Once you know the trick, you then know what you're looking for, right? But the application for that information is incredible, right? It's limitless. And in that context, the lady was talking about how, you know, if you're telling yourself you're not good enough, if you're telling yourself, you know, that you can't do it, then you're always going to see the evidence of what you're looking for. And at any point in your life, at any point in your life, I put it this way, I help families, right? I support parents, families, that kind of thing in my other job. And there's this parent that was struggling with a decision because they're like, oh, should I get this done? Should I not get this done? I'm not going to say what it was. It's kind of funny. Maybe one day I'll tell the actual story. But for today's purposes, they're like, should I get this procedure done to my children or should I not? I'm not so sure. Some people are saying yes. Some people are saying no. Some people are saying they're too old to have it done. Some people are saying it's good. Some people are saying maybe it might have lasting effects. I don't know, right? And I told them, look, both decisions that you're making, there is nothing illegal. There's nothing that's cruel punishment. There's nothing like that. So if you're looking for the perfect decision, you're not going to find it because your decision is going to have the positive, the pros, and it's going to have the negative, the cons. And so either way, you're going to have pros and cons no matter what you make, because a lot of the times there is evidence for and against at the same time, right? You look at the worst people and you can still find evidence of them doing good things. You look at the best people and you can find evidence of them doing the worst things or bad things or things that you thought they would never do. And that's why human beings never, ever surprise me. Because I know anyone's capable of anything put in the right circumstances with the right buttons pressed. But like I said, the application of this idea is almost limitless. And I think this is why it's so important to be aware of your goals, to be aware of what you want to achieve and to keep it at the forefront of your mind, because our brain is very good at identifying tools, obstacles, right? The reason why the yellow wasn't there is because it's not a tool to help you right now. So you ignored all the yellow in that video. You paid attention to the blues because those were the tool for you to be successful. So what can sometimes happen in life is when we're not aware of our goals and what we're trying to achieve, we're blind to the very opportunities that could change the course of our lives. We're actually blind to them. It's not that the opportunities aren't there. it's that we're not noticing the opportunities because they're yellow. And instead, we're focusing on the blue, which in this case might be, the fact that we're in a bad situation, the fact that we're not where we're supposed to be or where we'd want to be, because we all have this idea of when I'm at this age, I want to be this, I want to be married, I want to have this many kids, I want to have this job, I want to make this amount of money. And we focus on the fact that we don't have those things. But sometimes that's at the expense of noticing the actual opportunities right there before our eyes. So be mindful what you pay attention to. That's the lesson. And that's why I look, every problem is an opportunity. And whoever solves the problem then experiences success, right? Every problem is an opportunity. And so when I find myself around people who are kind of whinging and complaining, I try to limit that, right? Because I know I can whinge and complain too. Listen, I've got the same human trait. But is it useful? Does it help you? So yeah, the applications are far-reaching of this idea that we see what we're looking for. I say this for relationships. Hey, look, what do I know? But at any time, you could have good reasons to break a relationship of whatever kind, or you could have enough reasons to keep it going, right? Obviously, outside of the kind of big, obvious deal breakers, right? Outside of those, at any point, you've got enough reason to keep the relationship going. And I'm talking about all types of relationships. That could be work. You've got good reason to just quit or not. But yeah. Yes, that's probably where tunnel vision in pilots happens, like the gear light bulb crash that happened in the swamps. We should probably watch that stuff in the flight deck too, especially during scanning for traffic in the sky. That's probably prone to not being seen, etc. Yeah. I think what you're saying there is just to be mindful of that, because that's where that is where it comes from, where we kind of delete things that are there because of what we're looking for. Confirmation bias is another way to put it. And so what we want to do is drift towards safety. And to do that, to be safer pilots, the truth is, and this is a long-standing tradition, which I absolutely love, is we look at what went wrong. We look at things that went wrong so that we can learn the lessons and carry the lessons forward. And so I saw an email come through, and it showed that, there was a safety review of 2025. And I said, I need to watch that. And I thought, okay, since I'm doing the show, I might as well put it on and we can watch it together, and you can comment in the chat what you think. I can interject at different points if I've had a similar experience or whatever, like heard a story about it, then I'll tell you, and we'll just work our way through it. So without further ado, let me load it up and let's have a watch. By the way, I'm going to put this to speed 1.5 because anybody looking to sit here for the whole hour. So here we go. Let's have a watch. Safety review 2025. And a lot of these stories we captured. I'll do this just so you can see Astral Aviation there. Obviously, give them a subscribe, go watch their channel. If you want to watch it for yourself, then feel free to go. Now I'm going to give them a like. I'm going to give them a subscribe as well. So shout out to them and thank you for this very useful presentation. I had a quick scan through it earlier, so I know it's going to be useful. A few stories in there that I covered last year, because every now and then I do cover investigations done by the AAIB, or the Air Accident Investigation Branch. And so if you have been following the episodes, you will be familiar with some of the stories that will come up. So let's have a watch.
Brought to you this evening by Astral Aviation Consulting on behalf of the UK Civil Aviation Authority. Of course, the next 75 minutes, we're going to break the workshop down into some easily digestible chunks, and we're going to cover 3 themes, which have all been the subject of recent AIB investigations, and through our work with the CAA, these are some safety themes that the CAA think, the GA unit think we would like to cover with you, and we welcome your engagement and your thoughts as we go through this as ever. The 3 themes are going to cover autopilot and trim runaways, fuel, testing and draining, and a bit of loss and control. There'll be lots of time for Q&A as we go through again, which we'd love you to take part. We've got the Q&A box and the chat box as well. But I'd like to introduce my fellow presenters. Delighted to have, again, Charlotte and Phil. They're familiar faces to some of you that have done these before. I'll let them introduce themselves next. If you haven't met me before, I'm Matt Lane. I'm a head of training, senior examiner with the CAA, and an active single multi-engined flight instructor. But I'll let Charlotte introduce herself. Over to you, Charlotte. Hello.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Charlotte Dadswell. I've been flying for over 20 years, instructing for 60.
By the way, do you guys watch videos at 1.5 or 2 times the speed? Let me know in the chat, because yeah, it's something I do, particularly for presentations. Let me know. Do you do the same?
Now, and I'm a full-time instructor and head of training.
I'm George, founder and CEO of Frag. I've worked in the food industry for like 8 years now.
Of course, we're going to have ads.
And Phil, great to have you with us again, Phil.
Yeah, hi, good evening, everybody. My name's Phil, pleasure to be with you this evening. My career spanned the RAF and civil sector, so from the Tornado, Hawk and Typhoon in the Air Force as a frontline pilot and an instructor. I currently fly for Virgin Atlantic. I flew the Jumbo, I flew for Thomas Cook as well, and I'm a General Aviation FI, also some display flying in my spare time. Pleasure to be here this evening. Looking forward to our session.
Brilliant. Thanks, Phil. So if you want to stay in the loop with events and resources, please sign up to our mailing list, and you can do this by going to our website, www.astralaviationconsulting.com, or use the link that's just appeared in the chat box. Signing up also will give you access to the replay of this workshop, so you don't have to take notes, or if there's bits you want to recover, you can do that, and there's a whole other host of safety resources in there as well. Somebody said actually as well that the chat box is not connected, but we've put that, but I'll let Sophie have a look, who's doing the tech for us in home. We've got in the audio, and link, but people can't actually post in it as well. So Sophie will be working on that in the background, but we'll keep pressing on for now as well. So we're going to start this topic with a poll just to get you thinking about this as well. So if we can have this poll on here, please. So a little bit more wordy, these polls tonight, but just hopefully get you thinking a little bit there as well. So in the event of an electric pitch trim runaway, especially at low altitude, what do you think is the most critical action to take? We've got a few options here as well. Immediately pull the master switch, circuit breaker, maintain control, and disengage yours.
So in the event of an electric pitch trim runaway, especially at low altitude, what is the most critical immediate action to take? Immediately pull the master switch, circuit breaker, maintain control of the aircraft with decisive force and disengage the autopilot/electric trim. C, immediately select full opposite pitch trim to counteract the runaway. D, check the flat position and adjust as necessary to recover from the dive. D doesn't even make sense to me.
Autopilot trim. Immediately select full opposite pitch trim to counteract the runaway, or check the flat position and adjust as necessary. What do people think? Give people just a few seconds to read that. Okay,
so we got guess B.
Okay. Let's have a look at results. Let's see what people think on this one there as well. So majority of people have gone for B, maintain control of the aircraft. And that is the answer we were looking for there as well. The master switch, and we'll kind of come on to this and discuss this as well.
Okay, interesting you point out C. Let me see if they're going to address that. If they don't, I might come back and address it.
There's lots of circuit breakers, there's lots of switches for different systems. So what we're going to do is, we'll discuss this in a little bit more, but really the answer we're looking for is the second one there, main control and disable the autopilot or electric trim. Like I say, look out for that theme because we're going to discuss it a bit more. Right.
So okay, so you said, now the thing is, I'm going to be honest, because I'm not going to lie to you guys. I'm going to be real honest with you. I don't have experience with electric trim. All right, so it's not in the aircraft I fly, so it's not part of like my usual thing. So this is very much me kind of being ahead of the game and learning about stuff that I'm going to eventually come into contact with before I do. But immediately select full opposite pitch trim to counteract the Runaway. So this is an electric trim that's like Runaway, and it might be full nose down, which we're going to see in a case that they've covered. It's going to be full nose down, for example, and you're trying to pitch back up or to pull the yoke back, and there's a lot of resistance because it's full pitch down. Probably if you try to just counteract it, that probably won't be effective. That's my guess. It probably wouldn't be effective. And so the best advice, as you'll see, is really to just try and disengage it completely. And there are different tricks or maybe one main trick that they kind of suggest to make that really swift, and that will come later on. But I don't anticipate that C could work just because there is an electric malfunction there, right? So you're kind of using the same electric device to kind of counteract the malfunction, which may not work. And you could lose valuable time depending on how high or what your altitude is. So that's my guess on that one. That's my guess. But your gut was correct. B, that was my gut as well. Part of me thinks C would be useless, really, though. Yeah, exactly. I agree with you. It's just going to be right. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense too. That could be possible where, you know, as soon as you let it go, it just goes back to where it was running away to. So, yeah, full nose up, full nose. I mean, in either direction is not good. It's a bit like life, right? Any excess, there's ditches on both sides of the road. You don't want to be full nose up. You don't want to be full nose down. You want to be just right. It's like the whole Goldilocks thing, right? Not too hot, not too cold, just the right temperature. So a lot of things in life are exactly like that. You're looking for the Goldilocks kind of temperature, or Goldilocks middle ground, let's say. Right, let's keep going.
Electric trim. Let's say look out for that theme because we're going to discuss it a bit more. Right, so the case studies we're going to discuss today do relate to some accidents and some AIB reports. Some of them are sadly fatalities, and that if some of you are involved in these accidents, our condolences, but we're not attributing blame. We're not trying to comment on the abilities or the decisions of anybody here. What we're trying to do is use these AIB reports and use the lessons and recommendations that came from them to have a safety discussion and maybe all take away some things that we can think about for our future flying. So, like I say, if you do know more about the accidents or whatever, please take it in the spirit that it's intended there as well. We're going to look at two AIB investigations, and these really to highlight how trim and autopilot malfunctions can rapidly become really problematic. And there's two aircraft, two reports there as well. So the first one is Golf Bravo Kilo Juliet.
This I covered sometime last year.
Whiskey. And this accident happened in July 2023 near Bagby Airfield. It's an Aztec. The pilot was returning from Ireland after a long multi-sector day, and everything looked routine until the aircraft turned on right base for runway 06. Now, radar and CCTV that they found and used in the report showed a progressively steepening descent. The aircraft suddenly entered a 30 to 40 degree dive from around about 1,000 feet, and they didn't see any attempt at recovery. The aircraft sadly struck trees and terrain almost wings level, and there was a quite severe post-impact fire. Now, what they found during the investigation was that the pitch trim drum, it was found 3 millimeters from the full nose down position, so it's pretty much all the way full nose down. Now, investigators did consider whether this was due to post-impact movement, but they also noted it was more nose down than any expected trim settings for the speeds observed on CCTV. So a trim runaway possibly be related to the inoperative but partially functional autopilot was considered the most likely cause, but it wasn't. They couldn't 100% prove it because of the nature of the wreckage. Now, the autopilot in this aircraft was placarded in op, yet it was still partially powered. The aircraft also lacked a yoke-mounted autopilot disconnect switch, and the relevant circuit breakers were low and out of sight. The pilot hadn't completed differences training on the Aztec as well, which may have been a factor. So in essence, they think at low altitude, a pitch trim excursion left the pilot with insufficient time or leverage to recover. So that's the first kind of case study that comes out. Now, the second one, before we go on to discussing some of the takeaways and the learning points from these, is an American registered aircraft, November 761 Juliet uniform. It happened Leeds East in April 2024. The pilot had flown 2 previous legs that day, and it had some intermittent autopilot trim warnings. But on the final departure, during the takeoff roll at about 70 knots, the pilot attempted rotation, but the control column wouldn't move. He rejected the takeoff, but as the power came off, the aircraft briefly became airborne. With full nose down trim set, the pilot couldn't hold the nose up. The aircraft bounced, the nose gear collapsed, and the aircraft inverted. Sadly, the pilot, the passenger later died from injuries, but the pilot survived. Now, the elevator trim in this case was found fully nose down. The autopilot system, as I said, had got some intermittent faults, and it was capable of driving the trim wheel fully without the pilot noticing. Now, the autopilot engage switch was found in the on position by part of the fire crew, so they believe that the autopilot was actually on. So this accident highlights how an unnoticed trim position or the trim being driven by a faulty autopilot, and this can produce a situation where the aircraft becomes uncontrollable, very low level, very quickly at quite a critical moment. So there's two accident case studies, like I say, quite topical ones, quite recent ones, all involving kind of trim and autopilot potentially issues. So I'm going to hand over to Phil now to talk about some learning points from there.
Right, just come into the chat. So let's see. I have to fly mostly on sims now with proper controls though and checklists, VATSIM, etc though. I've done 2 real world lessons though. Last one was the takeoff. Okay, love what you're saying. You're using the word though quite a bit. So you might just want to reduce your usage of the word though, just because it's it can take away and confuse. But okay, listen, what you make a great point there, because when I first started doing my PPL training and I wanted to save money because I did not have money, I did a couple of things. One, I took detailed debrief notes that I would look through like very regularly, particularly before each lesson and in the period in between, because I knew it would take me probably a month before I was to fly again. I filmed my lessons, including video and audio. And I did flight sim. And my whole thing when I, was looking at flight simming, it was do it in exactly the way that you do it normally as practice, just like the airline pilots do it. They go into a sim and they don't mess around flying legs that they never fly. They're doing the actual stuff that they do. So when I'm using my home sim, do it in the actual aircraft, from the actual airfield, in the actual practice area, doing the actual checklist with the actual knee board. So I completely agree with you on that one, 100%. 100%. So if you're going to do it properly. That is going to make sure that it helps your training, because bad habits do stick, right? Bad habits do stick. A PPL pilot crashed the plane after forgot carb heat, touch and goes, and crashed next to a pub. Pilot was fine, not so much. Plane, not so much. It was scrapped. Probably a write-off. Yeah, I can see that. Although I would say, see, when I filmed myself, and I said this last week, I flew into Old Buck, and as I was approaching, I thought, okay, I looked at the windsock and I was like, all right, there's a left crosswind here, so I'm going to go left wing down, right rudder, just on the flare, so that I can counteract the effect of the crosswind, which effectively I'd be cross controlling. And then I landed, I was like, something wasn't quite right. And then I looked at the footage and I had almost 0 wing down, almost 0 left wing down. Right. And so sometimes there can be a discrepancy between what we kind of remember happening and what actually happened. I don't think it's just me. I think it's a human trait, and we all have it to different degrees, depending on the circumstances, the situation, the day, etc., etc. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it. So, I mean, I would be interested to find out more about this case. I might look it up. Because forgetting the carb heat on touch and go does, in my opinion, again, hey, I'm just a PPL working my way through, all the licenses and the ratings in my own sweet time. But I just can't think why no carb heat would equal a crash. I just don't see it. There must have been something else, and that was a contributor, right? Yes, with the carb heat on, it's going to increase hot air, which means you're going to have less power available, right? So if you're probably pitching to the same level, pitching to the same attitude, but with less power, your speed is going to be lower. So you could be approaching stall. But again, if you were approaching stall, you would notice, or you should notice, the characteristics of a stall, and you could correct that and be like, wait, what's happening with my power? Put the carb heat away. You know, I have done a go around with no carb heat and corrected it. So I don't see how that automatically leads to a crash. So there must have been other factors that kind of, it's a bit like the Swiss cheese model, right? Where you can make one mistake, but it could be stopped by the next layer. But if it all lines up, one mistake exactly lines up with the next mistake, then you have an accident at the end. So my guess is that's probably what happened in that situation. But yeah, let's learn some of the lessons that happened from these Runaway pitch trim, and I'll keep an eye on the chat, and we'll keep chatting as we go.
Yeah,
Over to you, Phil.
Thank you. Thanks, Matt. Yeah, so some learning points from those then. So in knowing how the system operates, it's obviously really important to understand the manual, electric, and auto trim modes, how they operate and how they interact. So that's not something you've gone over recently. It's a good idea to have a look at. Knowing where these circuit breakers actually are and how to get to them instinctively is so important. I only had one of these for real. That was in the last aircraft, actually. That was a 747, a freighter version 747. The two trim cutout switches were immediately obvious. Big red covered switches, huge things, easy. In the aircraft that we're talking about, they're not that easy to identify, and it's so important to just know where they are to be able to get to them quickly. It's also worth just thinking about what the force is going to be like. The manual force when the system fails can be quite a lot, especially in older aircraft, and it happened quickly. It can be overwhelming, and it's definitely creates startle. So for me, a big learning point from this, or something to think about, is just how we self-brief, or we brief someone else if we're flying together, and bring in trim runaways into our TEM briefings, and just think with the startle that it's going to cause, especially if we're in a critical phase of flight, low to the ground, how are we going to deal with that? In these incidents, possibly, only possibly, the pilot could have been unaware of where the circuit breaker was for either the autopilot or the electric trim. Obviously, sometimes they're together, sometimes they're apart. So thinking about that TEM phase and the pre-takeoff vital actions, including an item in there that has you physically identifying the switch, just going through that cognitive process of getting to the circuit breaker is a really great idea. Not only is it going to help you get there quicker, but it's going to get that cognitive brain function going to make you do it in the event of having a trim runaway. Maybe a good one to reflect on how many of us actually do that. Before takeoff, we should also visually confirm the trim is in the takeoff range. Not many of us would routinely monitor the trim wheel necessarily, but if pitch authority feels abnormal, stop the takeoff if you're taking off nice and early, or if you're in the air, get to that circuit breaker as quickly as possible. Remembering that a trim runaway can happen at any time. So if you feel that force increasing, suspect it is a trim runaway. Fly the aircraft and get to that circuit breaker. Next slide, please. There we go. So the immediate actions for a trim runaway. Altitude, you're going to hold that and expect heavy forces. So we're going to fly the aircraft first. Autopilot, going to get that disconnected. Trim movement, you're going to stop by pulling the trim circuit breaker, and back to that all-important bit of knowing where it is and getting to it instinctively. Retrim manually, and then back to aviating, flying the aircraft, power, pitch, and stabilize. Both reports show that a disabled or placarded autopilot can still have a partial function. So if it's unserviceable, pull the circuit breaker and make sure it is isolated before flight. I fly the 330 now at Virgin, and that's one of our pre-flight checks, is that any placarded item, if it has a circuit breaker associated with it, that circuit breaker is pulled. So that's a really important one to do. And just of note, the AARB and the CAA highlighted the need from these incidents for formal differences training to include autopilot and electric trim systems, improved visibility for circuit breakers because it can be so difficult to identify, and reinforced maintenance requirements for older autopilot systems.
Yeah, so this is an interesting point that they've made in the last kind of minute or two. Knowing where the circuit breaker is, very important, particularly for autopilot or sometimes it's combined, and pitch trim, electric pitch trim, and being able to just disconnect that if something goes wrong and take over manually. I think that's a really, really important point. Really important point, and this is something we covered when we looked at those incidents or those accidents. There was the idea of tagging them in a different color. But how many pilots flying these aircrafts know which circuit breakers are for what? How many pilots actually know that? You know, I would venture a guess that the percentage isn't as high. So it's definitely a lesson worth learning and something worth paying attention to.
Charlotte, with that, I'll hand over to you.
Advert.
Okay, so takeaways from these. Both events sadly were preventable. The underlying issue in each case was trim mismanagement driven by autopilot faults or incomplete checks. Awareness and training are the primary defences here. Autopilots vary enormously in age, reliability and integration. Many have limited warning systems. If you don't know exactly how yours behaves, you cannot safely use it. Human factors, fatigue, workload, expectation bias, played a role in...
Right, so, okay, so the engine failed on takeoff because of the carb heat thing. Okay, so reduced, fair enough. I mean, that makes sense to some degree. That makes sense, although I don't obviously know the figures, but yeah, at least the idea of it makes sense. So it is very, very important. One thing that I did, because I was constantly during my PPL times forgetting to put the carb heat away, I developed this thing where I turn on final, I call final Golf Alpha Bravo Charlie Delta final, and then when I'm about like 300 feet above, I say carb heat is away, ready for a go around. And now it's part of my kind of practice. It's drilled into my brain. Yeah, for that exact reason, because I kept on forgetting the carb heat. So yeah, sometimes mistakes help us to learn, and hopefully we survive those mistakes. But where we don't have to go through the mistakes ourselves. When we see and hear about a situation like that, what Snake Biters is saying, that's definitely a reminder to pay attention to those things. So yeah, I definitely say out loud, carb heat is away, ready for a go around if I need it. And that's also because I would make a go around decision quite late on, and sometimes I committed to landing when I didn't need to. So that whole thing of putting the carb heat away and saying ready for a go around if I need it is just priming my mind to accept the go around. And when I fly with passengers now as well, I tell them, look, hey, I'm not going to force it, going around, because for a passenger who's not into aviation, when you go around, they might be thinking, wait, something's wrong. What's happening here? When actually for a pilot, I know that, okay, they're probably just choosing the safest option here. It's not that something's gone catastrophically wrong. Otherwise, they'll be gliding in, right? But if they're choosing to go around, they're making a safer choice. So I reassure my passengers earlier on, just say, hey, look, if we have to go back round because I'm not happy, that's absolutely fine. That's absolutely normal. We'll just go around, and I will only land when I feel like it's safe to do so. All right. So I do all of that to remove that pressure, to remove that get there-itis. Yeah, because that can be dangerous. That can be dangerous. So yeah, you have to notice your own tendencies and start to counteract your tendency, because look, your tendencies might not be what other people have, right? So maybe other people don't have to say that to themselves, but I do. So you just have to do what works for you. Do what works for you. But let's have a look through this. So eyes on the trim, actually visually check the trim, disconnect first, diagnose later. It's kind of like, this reminds me of if you're, shout out to the old person official. This reminds me of when you're anticipating engine failure on takeoff. So this is you rolling down the runway, you rotate, you take off, right? As soon as you hear zzz, pitch down, right? Don't even wait, because at the point of, and I got this from AQP Grassroots with Josh Flowers, Aviation 101, and Dan Grider. As soon as you just hear the sound, don't even look to diagnose. You just hear the engine sound go zzz, pitch down, because you're particularly vulnerable at this attitude with no power, right? With no power, you're going to stall very quickly compared to if you were like this, right? Because the stall obviously happens because of the increased angle of attack. So yeah, act first, diagnose later in certain cases. Disconnect first in this case, because what's the worst that can happen if you disconnect? Well, you just do it manually. Disconnect first, diagnose later. But that's what it made me think of. Know your circuit breakers, know your breakers. That's really important. And that's a lesson that I carry forward. Yeah, shout out to the All Person Official. Thank you for joining. Thank you for joining. Right, I'm going to just... Man United is playing tonight, so I'm going to miss the beginning part of the match because I'm here. All right, I'm just going to speed past this because I think it's quite self-explanatory. Let's see. Okay, so we're going to come to fuel.
But let's look at fuel.
Switch that back around.
In the next section. Get you engaged again. So let's have another poll.
All right, let's have a go in the chat.
I'm glad the chat's back working as well. Sophie, I don't know, kicked to the computer or did lots of things in the background. So thank you for getting that working again, Sophie. Here we go. Poll 3. You arrive at the aircraft. It's been parked outside. You drain the left wing. The sample tube's completely full of clear liquid. Smells fatally of avgas. What's the best course of action? So you've drained your tank, got a load of liquid out. Have a good sniff of it. Smells of avgas. What? So accept the sample. Drain another some. Continue draining. Start the engine. Check for normal running. What do people think?
What do people think? What do people think about that? Let me just skip that. What do we think? What do we think?
Yeah, that's exactly the answer that we.
So, answer C, continue draining the sump until you are certain no water remains, using the visual comparison and setting time. Now, some interesting, really interesting points raised coming up next.
We're looking for, and we're going to discuss with another case study why. Right, so this next accident report, it's based on a special bulletin, so the full accident report hasn't been out. A few of us, myself and Charlotte, have been down to the AIB and discussed this with the investigators and seen some of the actual factors involved and some of the things involved. It's November 4698 Whiskey. It's a Rockwell Commander, so a pretty punchy, pretty powerful aircraft. It suffered loss of power though on climb out due to severe water contamination in the fuel. So what happened? The aircraft departed Fife on the 24th of December 2024, and the CCTV showed the pilot arriving, conducting pre-flight checks, and then taxiing out. Now, he had the engine running as well for about 20 minutes, suggesting a warm-up or an extended check. Takeoff began just after 11:30, but less than 1 minute into the initial climb, CCTV footage shows the aircraft abruptly departing controlled flight and effectively an incipient spin. At the same time, interestingly, CCTV in a nearby village recorded the engine misfiring. The pilot got out a brief mayday call, but the aircraft sadly struck rising ground near Kinglassy, and the pilot did not survive. Now, at impact, as I show here, the landing gear retracted, the propeller was wind mirroring, and there was no fire. So what they quite quickly able to define was it was a fairly sudden loss of power rather than some kind of incipient mechanical failure. But the investigators found significant water contamination throughout the fuel system. And now in the carburetor alone, the water was present, enough water was present to cover the main jet inlet, and the engine was effectively ingesting water rather than fuel. So it was quite a significant power loss. Now, importantly, the AIB found, and this is where the investigation is going to go, that even a full sample tube of water could still smell of avgas, and Charlotte's going to touch on this more. So this is really very much a key learning point, and then Phil will give us some takeaways. So over to you, Charlotte, to give us some learning points on this one, please.
Flying.
Oh, my bad. My bad. Where was it? My bad. That's what happens when you're multitasking.
Over to you, Charlotte, to give us some learning points on this one, please.
Okay, firstly, this was not mechanical failure. The ignition system and the engine components checked out correctly. The root cause was this water contamination, which entered the fuel system sometime before the flight. The Commander 112 has a multiple sump drains, 2 per wing tank plus the gas escalator, and the POH requires draining all 5 points and repeating these drains until no water is present. If water is found downstream, such as in the gas escalator, the wing and wheel well drains must be redrained repeatedly. In this accident, enough water was present that even after one drain, subsequent samples might still contain water. The AIB notes that pilots sometimes rely only on smell, but as we've seen here, a tube of pure water can retain a noticeable avgas odour if the tube was previously used for fuel. Fuel samples must be assessed primarily by sight, not smell, as water will always separate and sink to the bottom.
I have never, ever heard of sampling by smell. So I don't know how that's crept into, this approach to what this pilot did or what some pilots have done. I've never heard of that. For me, it's always been sight. And this is one of the things I got the kid to do, the 11-year-old kid I flew with last week. So we flew to Duxford, and I was like, I wanted to give him a bit of an experience, the kind of experience I wish I had as a kid. So I got him to help me with the walk around, which we didn't need to do because I'd already done everything. But I got him to walk around with me, sample the fuel, and we looked at the color, and I said to him, okay, I asked him all the questions, and he's so smart. I asked him all the questions. I said, okay, so if it was contaminated with water, what would that look like? All right. Where would the water be? At the top, at the bottom? Which one's heavier? And he got all the answers right. So for me, it's always been a visual thing. I'm not sure how that turned into a smelling thing, because I would guess that if it's all mixed together, it will kind of smell similarly, right? But yeah. Anyways, what do I know?
In addition to using a fuel sample tube to check for water in the fuel, you can also check the fuel by pouring a small amount onto dry pavement. If you find water in your sample, it will bead up in droplets because of the surface tension. If bubbles form, you can step on them. Air bubbles will pop, but water drops will remain. So if the sample is all water, it forms a distinct puddle, whereas avgas will continue to spread. There are different ways of seeing the difference there. When you're checking a fuel sample at night, a bit more of a challenge. You need to hold the sample against a white backdrop if possible, such as a fuselage, and shine a light on it from the side. The white backdrop will make it easier to detect the colour of the fuel, and light shining from the side illuminates nicely any debris and contaminants more readily. In this case, the aircraft had been outdoors for 7 weeks with only the cockpit covered. Fuel caps had recently had seals replaced, indicating previous water ingress concerns. This should have been an indicator to increase the need for repeated fuel sampling, particularly prior to the first flight in a while. Also note that the handling after the engine failure contributed to the accident outcome. The aircraft entered a stall or a spin after power loss, reinforcing the importance of flying the aircraft above all else in an engine failure after takeoff situation. Immediately pitch the glide speed and then assess what options are available. So looking at the next slide, looking at these different fuel samples on the screen, first one is 100% avgas, second one 100% water, and then 50-50. The water is colourless, and notice it sinks to the bottom, sitting below the avgas in the right-hand sample. So you're going to see a nice clear join. Careful not to shake the sample and mix them, and let it settle out, and then you can see clearly if there's any water present.
Thanks, Charlotte. And we'll do the takeaways. I'm not going to steal eat Phil sandwiches there, but just have a look at those pictures and that as well. So there's if you're in a rush, you're in a hurry, some of those pictures could look quite similar, couldn't they? But let's talk about these takeaways, Phil. Then.
Yeah. So thanks, Matt. So yeah, this incident, it underscores a real critical message, right? That the water ingress is one of the main threats to piston aviation. There's not that long ago, I walked out to last year. I walked out to PA28, which had both of its fuel filler caps off. They've been off all night. That was a really easy one to spot. But water ingress can happen, as Charlotte's alluded to, much more insidious ways, meaning that even well-maintained aircraft, flown by experienced pilots, can be brought down by water that goes undetected pre-flight. So it's that pre-flight stage that's going to really save us. So 3 key takeaways. So drain all fuel sumps visually, repeatedly, and thoroughly. If water is found in any location, you've got to keep draining until that is entirely clear. Secondly, do not rely on smell. A full tube of water can still smell of fuel, especially in the flying clubs with the tubes used all the time. Those tubes would still smell of fuel to be in the washing machine 20 times. So you can't rely on you just can't rely on the smell. And thirdly, remember that we need to take fuel samples prior to refueling the aircraft. It's the act of refueling is going to mix that water and fuel, meaning that samples will not necessarily.
That's a really good point. That's a really good point, and a point that I hadn't thought about, but it makes sense when you think about it. Take samples prior to refueling. In fact, something that happens is, depending on what kind of flying you do, you end up having your own process. And one of the things I do because of how I hire aircrafts is I've, for example, previously untied the aircraft, done, walked around it, only to right at the end find out something that, changes everything. I don't know, say like the tires are off, or, something that stops the flight. So what I've developed now is I check specific things before I even begin the pre-flight. One of those is sampling the tanks, checking how much fuel, because I might just switch to a different aircraft which has the right amount of fuel, because it might have too much fuel, it might have too little fuel, might be too heavy, might not have enough. So I check the oil, check the fuel, and sample the fuel tanks and have a quick look at the tires before I even begin anything. Then if I'm happy with those, then I proceed, take the tie downs off, control locks off, and do my walk around. So yeah, you develop different kind of approaches based on what your situation is. But sampling is definitely an important one that should be done with good care.
Necessarily show water. It takes approximately 20 minutes for the water to sink through the fuel to the bottom of the tank, which is the area where you're going to drain it and detect it. So the sample has to be taken prior to refueling. Another important point is never to change fuel tanks prior to takeoff. Takeoff should occur on the same tank that you've just conducted the power checks on. Obviously, read your own aircraft's manual, or the POH. Some aircrafts specifically state the fuel flow from each tank must be selected on the ground prior to departure to check for sound fuel flow. But the big takeaway there is never switch them over to a tank that hasn't been used for checking on the ground. And ultimately, as Charlotte spoke to it.
So this particularly applies to, say, the PA-28, where you have to switch between the left and right tanks. Not so much the Cessna 152, Cessna 172, where you could just select both tanks. So this is a good point, because in the PA-28 checklist, you would select the tank with the fewest contents usually, and taxi out, and then before your power checks, it would say select the tank with the fuller contents, do your power checks then. And what he's saying here is, once you use that tank for your power checks, keep that, because essentially you've run the aircraft up where it's needed more fuel, and it's used the fuel from that tank, so you know that that tank is good, basically. Which interesting takeaway.
At the end of her piece then, be prepared for an infarto. This forms part of our TEM, part of our thought processes to startle and to TEM briefing, and be prepared for that engine failure after takeoff, and be prepared with the correct actions, which are going to be to close the throttle and get the mixture to instinctive cut off. That keeps things simple. It stops the engine firing back up into life after you've planned your perfect force landing after takeoff. But just be ready. These events are rare, thankfully, but they are deadly, and we avoid them by the meticulous fuel checks, no matter what, on the ground before takeoff. Matt, back to you.
Thanks, Phil. That's great. And a few people have commented, how did the aircraft actually get airborne, and if there was water in it? I've dealt with a couple of cases actually in some of my own flying schools where the fuel draw during the taxi and even during the short power check is is fairly minimal. But as soon as you get that full demand, that full power demand on the climb out, it can be just a kind of horrible 400 or 500 foot point of view when there's been quite a draw of fuel. But that's when it suddenly goes. Somebody's asked as well, what kind of percentage of water will cause engine failure, and what percentage would lead to rough running partial power? I don't know what you think, Phil. I don't think there's a definite answer to that, really. I think it will be very type dependent as well. I would think, really. I don't think there's yeah.
I think really, type dependent, engine dependent. I think the key is to do the pre-flight checks properly and make sure there's no water present.
Yeah, and as somebody's commented, if a substantial amount of
I think that would be, so as you said, type dependent, but I think it's also condition dependent, right? Because it's a fuel air mixture, and it depends, and maybe the engine might tolerate it a bit more if the air is kind of less dense at that time, because it needs less fuel essentially. So I think there are multiple factors there.
Fuel is found in the substantial amount of water is found in the fuel. Shouldn't the aircraft be declared as unserviceable? Yes, because there's obviously something really gone on with that aircraft, and it really needs checking out by a maintenance organisation if you're finding significant amounts of contamination. And fuel icing can be an issue there as well. Somebody said, at what points recommended we change tanks for the first time? Charlotte, when do you teach to change tank? What's your kind of tank changing regime? What do you teach at your school?
On Cessnas, we select both unless they get uneven, so that makes life easy. But I suppose it depends what you're doing. But yes, it's just changing regularly, trying to keep it balanced up, and but not at low level.
Yeah, so fuel pump on, change tank, fuel pump off, check if you've got a gauge that fuel pressure is remaining. So I think that's the.
And again, all of those are checklist. If you've got a checklist and you've read the the manual, then you know that those things should happen. And so it's very important to avoid complacency. Very important to avoid complacency. Let's go loss of control.
So going to move on to loss of control. Let's have another poll just to get you engaged as well. Right. Could I have this poll then, please? So in the event of a stall warning during a go-round, what's the most appropriate pilot response? I'll let people read these. I'm not going to for this one. There's no tricks here, and remember, with any of the polls, we don't record who says what. We have no idea who says what. There's no feedback, no jeopardy here. So hopefully most people will get this right. Go on then. Let's have a look at the answers, please, Sophie. Yes, 95% reduce the pitch angle to decrease it. Yes, angle of attack. Yeah. So yeah.
Yeah. So let's see. A, immediately increase the pitch attitude to climb. That's the last thing you want to do. Ignore the stall warning and continue the go around. Last thing you want to do. D, apply more power and retract flaps to accelerate the climb. Yeah. So you've already applied full power during the go around. So that's redundant. Retracting flaps to accelerate. It depends. You want to have the power set first, and then it depends on what flaps you've used. So if you're on full flaps, then obviously follow the aircraft manual, whatever it is. With the Cessnas 172, usually it's 30 degrees of flap. So if you go full power, then you initially retract down to 20 degrees, and then safe speed, positive rate of climb, then retract the next stage, safe speed, positive rate of climb, then the next stage. So it has to be in steps. So that could be quite dangerous to just retract flaps. I don't know what that means. But reducing the pitch attitude to decrease angle of attack, I guess in a way that could feel counterintuitive if you're not used to it, because you're trying to go back up, but you're kind of pushing forward, which could be kind of mind-boggling if you're not used to it. So, and messed up go-arounds are a reason, some of the reasons for crashes and accidents, like was mentioned earlier. Messed up go-arounds. Again, I'm pulling from AQP, grassroots AQP with Josh Flowers, Aviation 101, and Dan Grider. On that list of things that cause accidents are messed up go-arounds. So it's definitely something to practice, to stay on top of, to be proficient in.
Yeah. Most people get no idea. I think they've all been attending some of our control workshops, but just hold this for when we talk about the next case study there as well. Yeah, somebody's commented it's tricky for a rotary pilot. I'm sure some of my gyrocopter colleagues on there as well will also have slightly different things. So loss of control, there's two case studies here. Again, some of you may know some more about these, but let's have a look. The first one is a Cirrus. It's Romeo Golf Sierra Kilo, if you want to Google or look at the link. It's a Cirrus. The pilot had 115 hours total time, 16 on the aircraft type. And he was flying some circuits practice. His first two touch and goes, quite normal, but on the third, the aircraft bounced on touchdown. Now the data shows, and they've got data from various sources, various engine management and other sources around, and they had some CCTV, as you can see. Power was briefly reduced, but then full power was applied. Full flap was still selected, the nose pitched up further. It then rolled and yawed left, continued to turn until the bank exceeded 90 degrees. The wing entered a fully stalled condition for the final 5 seconds of flight, and the aircraft struck the ground, sadly, approximately 40 meters from the runway. Now, also the CAPS, the Cirrus parachute system, did deploy, but that was due to the breakup sequence because the activation cable was damaged. So, yep, go around and full power loss of control. So quite sad, very close to the runway. The second accident is a Sports Star, and it's Golf Charlie Mike Golf Bravo, if you want to Google that. It departed Cole Aston in what were actually marginal weather conditions. Lots around this, around weather forecasting, getting information. That's whether the pilot knew he was departing into marginal conditions, we don't know. But CCTV at departure showed visibility as low as 400 to 600 meters with low cloud around. After takeoff, the pilot flew multiple orbits.
Whether or not the pilot knew that it was departing into marginal conditions, we don't know. But I think that it's fair to say that pilots should know. It's very important to pay attention to those details because your life could depend on it. And of course, the lives of your passengers and or the unsuspecting public who could be subject to the consequences of your mistake. So you always want to, I always remember that during one of my PPL flying lessons, when I said to my instructor that, you know, oh yeah, like when I fly with passengers, like thinking about when I'll get my license, like when I fly with passengers, oh, I'm going to be even more super careful because, you know, like I value their lives, right? In a way, even more than I value my own. And my instructor made the point that, well, what about the people on the ground that didn't sign up for the risk that you're taking on when you're flying? And I thought, that's something I hadn't thought about. Just the average person on the ground living their life who didn't sign up to the risk of flying GA or general aviation, they could be impacted, right? If you have to do a forced landing and you end up in their field, well, that's in a lesser way than, say, if you were to park the plane, you know, right through their front door whilst they're having dinner or something. So, yeah, either way, there are multiple people that you kind of want to keep in mind that, you know, a lot of people could be affected by your choices. So, yeah, with that in mind, you should know those details, and it's good airmanship to do that. And in fact, it even goes past good airmanship. It's legal safety kind of can go into that territory. Right, let's keep going.
Change altitude repeatedly and then track south towards Chesterfield. Now, some ADS-B recorded data shows the aircraft climbing and descending in IMC-like conditions with effectively the aircraft entering cloud mainly. Witnesses saw the aircraft entering into cloud, re-emerging low, and then climbing steeply back. So this poor pilot was obviously desperately trying to get into VMC conditions. But over Chesterfield, the aircraft entered a series.
By the way, just to mention, right, and I don't shy away from talking about the fact that I make mistakes, but I try not to make them what's happened to my lights? 1 second. I try not to make them wherever I can. And so when I make statements like the statement I just made, it's note to self in my mind rather than me speaking on somebody else. It's me talking out loud to make sure that I've heard myself say it so that I can remember my own voice when I'm flying. All right. So anything I say in these videos is not primarily about other people. It's mostly about myself because all I can do is control the type of pilot that I am. And it's down to everyone else to do their part.
Of descending spirals. Some of the rates of descent were over 5,000 feet a minute. And then finally, it was over 11,000 feet a minute of descent in a steep right rotation. And tragically, it impacted an industrial estate. So another loss of control, but quite different to the first accident. So let's see what points we can get out of these. So moving on, over to you, Phil. What points? Two quite different accidents here, but yeah, what points can we take out? Maybe some common points.
Yeah, no, indeed, very different accidents. The so I mean, the first one, it's low speed, high angle of attack, and rapid application of power. I fly the Cirrus from time to time, and it does have strong left-turning tendencies when power is applied. At low speed, obviously with the flaps out, high pitch, these forces are amplified, and a significant amount of right rudder is required when you're increasing power. The Cirrus training manual emphasises speed application of power of 4 to 5 seconds, immediate right rudder to counter yaw, and pitch just above the horizon to stabilise, then clean up to 50% flap. In this incident itself, power was just applied too rapidly with insufficient rudder, and the pitch altitude stayed too high with a stall warning on throughout. And, it's important, even in these Cirrus very advanced aircraft. I think it's important to emphasise just the absolute basics of looking at the front, balancing any yaw with rudder, and selecting the appropriate nose attitude, and you will be you will be okay. In this incident as well, the pilot recency was an issue, so hadn't flown for 54 days. Clearly, this incident is going to induce startle and potentially over rotation. So being really defensive and about our recency, I think is important. Complacency as well, or skill fade. So we see this a lot in the airline industry. Cirrus puts in a yaw damper above 200 feet, meaning that during normal flight, you don't really need to use the rudder. If you have an aircraft like this, or you fly an aircraft like this, what we often talk about in the Airbus world, which is full of this stuff, is to try and stay engaged with the airplane. So while in a Cirrus, you don't need to apply the rudder once the yaw damper is in. Make sure you stay engaged with it, know what the airplane is doing, so that you don't lose that motor skill yourself. So power applied too rapidly, pitch attitude too high, and no standard stall recovery applied. Moving to the sports style then, so he's an experienced pilot, but with limited or no IMC experience. So his MPPL syllabus didn't require him to do instrument flying, and was therefore vulnerable to the loss of spatial awareness in cloud. In the forecast that day, risk of showers, embedded cloud, low cloud bases, and actual conditions at Colaston showed a low cloud base around 200 feet. Once visual reference was lost, the aircraft's pitch and bank inputs became unstable, consistent with that lack of SA. Ground speed increased to 178 knots at one stage, suggesting or confirming spatial disorientation. Loss of control is primarily attributed to IMC entry and disorientation. And obviously, if you're not trained in flying, once that disorientation happens, it's very unlikely it's going to get better. I've lost friends in these scenarios. I think it's really important to remember that even if we are trained in instrument flying, we've got that qualification. It's a perishable skill. If we have hopefully a lovely summer in 2026, lots of VMC flying, I think it's worthy of consideration about a currency flight or some kind of training before going back into full IMC trade flying, depending on how competent and how much experience you've got in doing so. And there's a question that we will never know the answer to, but as a team, we've kind of thought about this. Was there somewhere this pilot had to get to? Was there some pressure on him needing to be somewhere? And the saying that it's better to arrive early than never to arrive late rather than never to arrive. If a flight is no longer looking sensible, no looking like a safe proposition, then either cancel it or get a car. But with that.
By the way, if you want to watch a video about inadvertent flight into IMC, into the cloud, this is a video I watched yesterday, which I found really interesting, because this pilot had flown into the weather and was like disorientated, but he managed to stay alive for like around about 30 minutes, which I think Hoover says that statistically you have about 6 to 9 minutes, something like that, and he stayed alive for about 30, which was quite something. But there are moments where he's being seen on radar, and on the radar, the controller is basically saying, hey, look, you're flying level. You've just got a slight right turn there. I just need you to turn the yoke slightly to the left just to go wings level. And the pilot's like, no, I'm falling. Right? Which is quite, it's really interesting. I don't think, I've never experienced it myself, but I don't think it can be overstated how disorientated you can get and how important it is to not trust your senses in that situations, and to trust your instruments. In that particular incident, the attitude indicator was inoperable. The turn coordinator was inoperable. So it's quite a situation to be in. So if you want to watch that, do check this video out by Pilot Debrief. It's really cool. Really, really, when I say cool, maybe cool's not exactly the right word, but it's really useful to learn the lesson, based on somebody else's mistake, which is obviously tragic and unfortunate. But we need to learn in order to be safer. So do check that out if you're that way inclined. Back to our safety review of 2025. We're nearly at the end. Where am I? There we go.
Over to Charlotte.
Thanks, Phil. So takeaways from these. Both accidents highlight the importance of maintaining control and flying the aircraft. The Cirrus accident demonstrates how quickly a go-around can deteriorate when pitch, yaw, and power are not managed together. A full flap go-around requires precise control, applying power smoothly, especially if you've got a lot of it, as in this case, and control pitch to prevent excessive angles of attack, using appropriate rudder, in this case right rudder, to prevent yaw as the power is applied. Avoid over-rotation, keeping that nose just above the horizon until accelerating, and use the trim to help you. Recognise the approaching stall, nose high pitch attitude, decreasing airspeed, aerodynamic buffet, and stall warner if you have one. Maintaining recency, skill fade, as we said, affects decision making and motor response. On the next slide, the Sportster accident reinforces several key safety principles. There we go. VFR minima limits, not targets. Safe flight requires much better conditions. If the visibility is less than 5 kilometers or the cloud base less than 1,500 feet, pilots should really treat conditions as potentially unsafe for VFR. In IMC, we cannot rely on vestibular cues. IMC entry rapidly becomes deadly to pilots not qualified to fly on instruments. So an immediate 180-degree turn is the recommended escape maneuver. If in doubt, do not launch. Delaying the departure would probably have prevented this accident. VFR flight into IMC remains one of the most lethal accident categories, so strict personal minima and weather discipline are critical.
Thanks.
Very important. I'm going to stop it there because the rest is just some quizzes, which again, you can feel free to go over to Astral Aviation TV web YouTube page. Yes. So the internet decided to play up. The internet decided to play out. It's a conspiracy. against me. But yes, if you wanted to watch that, take yourself to Astral Aviation. Let me see. What is that? Astral Aviation TV. So you can finish that if you want to have a look at the quiz towards the end. Thank you very much to those who have joined on Kick. Shout out to the growing Kick channel, slowly but steadily, you know, organic, not paying for bots, not paying for views. Shout out to the Kick channel growing. If you're watching on Kick, make sure you hit that follow button so you don't miss any new streams. If you're on YouTube, make sure you hit the sub button, smash that like button, particularly if you were in the chat. I'm expecting at least a few likes. All right, hit that like button. Doesn't cost you anything. All right, so just hit that like button so that you can help me with the algo, and I would much appreciate it. Right. In case you're new to the channel and you're not familiar with the content, get familiar, because there are some, you know, quite some interesting content for you to feast on. If you're going through your PPL, then you would find this particular series very interesting. This is Learning to Fly Season 1 and Season 2, basically. Check it out.
Nice takeoff.
That's a screw. I was waiting for that because everyone does it.
I'm gonna make sure that you can do it. And you can do it, I know.
Gonna get to the height of a double-decker bus.
How about this height?
Smoothly throttle to idle. Smoothly raise the nose.
This is floating. It's float.
Yes, man. Good food after hard days of flying, bro.
Bro, it's needed, man. That landing. Woo. I'm worn out.
Yes, particularly useful if you're going for your PPL training, just because you get to see what's coming before you do it. So it's another way to just get yourself ahead of the curve. Yeah. But also if you want to be entertained, it's a bit of entertainment. And if you wanted to be entertained even more, then you could check out the Fly to Dance series or mini series. Which was filmed last year. I've always loved flying.
Hello! Ultra radar, come on! Well done.
And dancing, there's no denying. If only I could blend the two. I know what I'll do. I'll fly to new places, to dance with new faces. Making the most of the wings a private pilot license brings.
That was a little bit gusty.
Just made a no-fly decision.
Squawk on switch duty, 3-call shore.
A different way to our build and advance.
2-0, joy and downwind.
I call it Fly to Dance.
Full flaps.
Ooh, nice one.
Flaps come up.
Well, flight, man.
Foxtrot Sierra, welcome to shore.
We have everything in this flight, man.
Everything, bro.
Yeah, I was actually in Brighton this past weekend. I was in Brighton for salsa this past weekend, but I didn't fly this time. But yeah, that was a fun time being able to fly out there, do some salsa. I need to figure out a way to do another series where I'm going to fly somewhere else to do some salsa or some kind of dancing, but it's just a bit of a challenge to get all the everything to line up. The weather has to be right. The aircraft has to be available. It has to be, an interesting enough venue for me. And it has to be a good enough event, because I'm not trying to fly somewhere to land and just kind of have like 2-3 people on the dance floor waiting to dance. That wouldn't be worth it. So yeah, this event, the Brighton one, was very, very much worth it. So I need to find some. I know there's a lot of dancing happening on the South Coast, Southampton, Bournemouth, those kind of areas. So maybe I will stick to the South Coast. I don't know. We'll see. We'll see. Good luck to. I don't usually say good luck. I don't know. Saying good luck feels weird. I'm wishing all the best to everyone who's applying. I know that Leading Edge have an opportunity that came up where they'll partially fund your training and give you a job as a flight instructor. So all the best to people who are applying to that. Then Jet2 also opened Flight Path. So that will fund you to essentially become a Jet2 pilot. All the best to people applying to that as well. All the best. Hopefully in the next kind of few weeks or so, British Airways will be opening theirs as well. And I'm wishing all the best to everyone applying to that as well. I hope you continue to, advance towards your dream. I hope you continue to be grateful. And I hope that you will, above all, continue to learn from your experience, from other people's experience, and continue to grow. Thank you very much for joining me. As you know, the show is live on Kick and YouTube every Monday, 7 p.m. Zulu time. That's soon to change after end of March. We've got a few more weeks to go. Again, if you're on YouTube, make sure you hit the sub button, hit the like button, turn on the notification. If you're on Kick, make sure you hit that follow button. Until next time, this has been Future Pilot 901, and I'm your future captain, reminding you to live your dream. Peace.
Man, from living in my car to finally getting my trial flight done.
Hold it.
To being in this moment.
Come on. Well done.
Was it worth the sacrifice? Oh man.
Flat. Pull back. May pull back more. Hold it there. Pull back.
Radar 130.
A bit more.
Listen. Was it worth the sacrifice?
So, power right on. Center line.
Listen, if you have a dream, it's down to you to make it happen, man. You might give it everything and it might still not work, but guess what? The journey makes you a better, stronger person. Can you imagine what kind of person you would become if you didn't pursue the one thing that you thought was the best thing in the world? You didn't pursue it. What kind of person does that make you after 20, 30 years of doing that? But when you chase what you believe is the most valuable, the most beautiful, the most awesome thing that you can do, and you give it everything, win or lose, you become a better person.
Ever since I was a kid, I had a dream of becoming a pilot, but could never afford it. One day I decided to stop making excuses, to sacrifice my comfort, to make my dream happen. My name is D, and this is my journey. This is Future Pilot 901.